This episode is sponsored by Agent CRM. If you're in sales and tired of paying 3, 4, or 5 different companies for your email, CRM, funnels, phone, follow-up automation, check out Agent CRM. It's an all-in-one tool that combines all that you need to reach out, nurture, and close your clients. They've got weekly support calls so you can get up and running in no time. Get a free 14-day trial by going to the link below in the show notes. Hello, everyone. This is Dan with the Intentional Entrepreneur Podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. He's the founder and CEO of Zencastr, a podcasting platform, and built it to a rapidly growing all-in-one podcasting platform for creators worldwide. His entrepreneur journey took him around the globe, from Texas to Australia to New Zealand to Thailand, and now in Utah, where he bootstrapped Zencastr to profitably as a solo team. I do want to welcome to the show Josh Nielsen.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Glad to be here.
Hey, my pleasure. And thank you so much for having your team reach out to us. And obviously, we use Zencastr as the platform to record our podcast. So when your team reached out to us, we were so excited to have you share your journey about being an entrepreneur and being a podcaster, and creating the software for other podcasters to use. But before we kind of get into today's topic, which is setting your bootstrap company up or apart in a very competitive market, can you share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, let's see. In a nutshell, I started working for startups, caught the startup bug, wanted to get more involved. Then I joined the team at Techstars and Techstars Boulder as a developer in residence to help them get their team's products ready for their demo day. Then I started my own business called Soundkeep. I say business, but we never made any money and it didn't really work out in the end, but made that with a couple of friends and had a lot of good experience just on what works and what doesn't and what to do next time. And then that was sort of Soundkeep was about helping electronic musicians collaborate together online. And then that led me to hearing that, you know, while music is a really hard space to build a business in, someone said, hey, you know, podcasters have this problem getting audio, dealing with quality audio. And I didn't really understand it at the time. Although I was a podcast listener, I'd never really been involved in the creation side. Interviewed some people, found out that sure enough, at the time, everybody was using Skype. And Skype records the host in pretty high quality, but the guest it records after it gets compressed and sent through the internet. And so you would have dropouts, robotic voices, you know, all kinds of things that really annoy the listener. And people were on Twitter like complaining at the hosts, like, I can't listen to this, I gotta unsubscribe. And so it was a really big pain point and a big problem. Realized I could use a lot of that same skill set that I learned dealing with the music music app and use that to make an app where you just send a link to whoever you want to record with. It opens up a web application, a lot like a Skype or a Zoom interface. But when you hit record, it records you locally on your end, me locally on my end, both in high quality. And then we mix that together in the cloud after the fact. And so that was the initial MVP product that got us started. Of course, now we've expanded into like helping with hosting and distribution and growth tools, finding your audience, monetization, and you know, the whole all-in-one thing.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. And, you know, obviously you've been around the block a couple of times. Bootstrapping is a part, you know, a lot of startups use that because for whatever reason, they don't have access to capital that they need. So they, you know, they have to just spend their own money. But in competitive markets where I don't know if you listen to Dan Kennedy as far as marketing goes, but here's the thing. He says, like he who can spend the most money to acquire a customer wins. And, you know, obviously with a well capitalized competitor, you're kind of at a disadvantage. But you have experience bootstrapping a company and making them a competitor in a crowded marketplace. Can you talk a little bit to that particular issue?
Yeah. When the company started, the goal was not to really even make a startup or a high growth company. It was very much
Mm.
like, let's build a lifestyle business that can like
Mm.
support my family.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to that point. And then it was like, okay, well, what's next? And that's right when podcasting sort of hit the modern renaissance that it's in. And also a bunch of big other players were coming into the space as a result of that. And so the company has sort of shifted identities as far as like what you would classify it as over time. Eventually, we did
Mm-hmm.
end up raising money as well.
Mm-hmm.
But jumping back to your question about bootstrapping, um, you know, I I didn't have any venture capital. I didn't have any money. The only money I really took was at one point I did it on the side while I was contracting for other companies for a long time. I ran it for almost 2 years as a free service on the side. Wasn't
Mm-hmm.
making any money, and so I had to really that forced me to figure out how to keep costs really low. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to do some, things like I couldn't store the data. You had to bring your own Dropbox account. Like you couldn't use the service unless you logged in with your Dropbox, and then we would send the data straight there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, we were using a technology called WebRTC, which is a peer-to-peer communication platform that lets you do voice and video in a peer-to-peer way, so that it's not running through centralized servers that we would have to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big part of it, as well as like just figuring out how to keep the costs low. And as a
Mm-hmm.
result of that, we were able to sort of compete and always have a free plan, even as a bootstrapped company, in a way that normally you would need like venture capital money to do. But we just figured out how to make the operating costs so little that we could act as if we do the same playbook that normally you can't like have a free plan if you don't have a bunch of money, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so figured out how to run a freemium model while still being bootstrapped was, I think, a big part of just the success of the company at that stage, because just word of mouth, and as well also just by luck, podcasting is a social activity. And so whenever somebody's using it, like 80+% of podcasters have a remote guest or a remote co-host on their episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just brings more people into the platform. And so being able to cast a wide net with a freemium product and then cost effectively and use that for user growth was, I think, one of the key factors in helping us sort of compete as a bootstrap business.
Yeah. How much would you say your success, at least at the beginning, had to do with timing? Because, it seems like part of your success was the availability of these low cost. You didn't have to store, right? You got web RTC and you had your own Dropbox, right? I don't know. Dropbox been around a while now. Maybe let's say 15 years ago or 20 years ago, right? Those technologies didn't exist. And so would you say kind of part of it is a little bit of luck, a little bit of timing, having those technologies existed that you could piggyback on without having to incur too much costs?
Certainly. I mean, there was a lot of timing that went into this, just and by just chance and luck. For instance, when I was building the other project, Soundkeep, part of the reason that I was able to drift in this direction was as we were building that and I was learning what the capabilities were of the browser around audio, which was not very much at the time. As we were building it, they started launching new things like the web audio API, which lets you kind of pipe and manipulate audio, run it through nodes and download it and save it and that sort of thing, as well as the ability to get access to the microphone and the camera on each user's device. That just wasn't possible before, like technically not possible in a browser. And there were other companies that were trying to do what we were doing, basically what's called a double-ended recording, where you record on each side and then mix it together afterwards. But you had to download an app, or you had to download a desktop application. And that's a lot of that's just a little bit too much friction for the guest. They don't want to have to download anything. They don't have to learn anything. Sometimes they can't download or install tools depending on like, you know, if they're at work and their network security stuff.
Yeah.
And so being able to just make it so you send a link, all they have to do is put in their name and you're good to go, was like that got over that friction point and made it possible. So there's a lot of things that kind of came together at that time. In fact, when I started building it, it really wasn't possible for it to work in the end, but it became, I didn't know that at the time as I was building it. And then it sort of became possible as I was working on it. And so we really hit it right on the kind of the bleeding edge of the technology, which is a tricky space to be in, but also an advantageous space to be in. The tricky part is the APIs that the browsers were releasing. Different browsers had different versions, and sometimes they would just break, and they would ship something new that broke what you were doing, and you may have to like, you might be out of luck and it's just not going to work for a while, or you have to figure out a clever workaround. That was stressful, but also it's an advantageous place to be in because, you know, not very many companies maybe even know that technology exists yet when it's that new. Not many of them are ready to jump on it that quickly, especially larger, slower moving companies. So there's this window of opportunity that sort of follows that cutting edge of technology for young, kind of scrappy, fast moving companies to jump in and take advantage and be kind of get on the front of the wave. And then luckily, as I was building it, because again, podcasting was not a exciting space with air quotes at the time. Like nobody was clamoring about it. Nobody was raising money in this space. You know, it was sort of just something that had been around for already like 10, 15 years and had kind of just been slowly kind of percolating. And then as I was building and launching Zencastr, Serial came out and This American Life, and they started getting 1 million downloads per episode. And that was a pretty big inflection point for the podcasting space, because then a lot of the bigger players who were like, oh, I have advertisers. Look, there's a bunch of inventory popping up over here and it's really cheap. And so then it got just a lot more interest from bigger players suddenly, like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, Facebook, you name it, all kind of launched their own podcasting initiatives in different ways. And that's when it became clear that we kind of had caught a tiger by the tail, a bit by accident, which again goes against the intentional entrepreneur part here. But you kind of just have to, you know, it's companies are living things that kind of can take you in unintended directions, and the market forces change, and suddenly you've got a whole new thing on your hands. And so that was when we decided, hey, it might be a good idea to shift gears out of, you know, having this be a small business or a lifestyle business into, you know, the opportunity was there to get funding. The space was growing really strong, and there was competition from multi-billion and even trillion-dollar companies coming into the space. And so how do you stay relevant in the face of that? And that's what ultimately led us to go on and then shift gears into raising money and doing the whole startup thing.
So for a long time, obviously you ran it by yourself. At what point did you decide to kind of take off your everything hat, or, you know, take a couple of hats off and then just wear the CEO hat and bring in other developers and other team members to kind of take over other responsibilities for you?
That was a tough one, because part of the reason why I started the company on my own was I wasn't super interested in like managing people and doing like that higher level stuff. I really enjoy being on the implementation side. And also in the early days, I was doing customer support and all the engineering and like the design and like everything in between. Not necessarily great at all of those things, but I had a really tight feedback loop between what the customers were saying on the support side and what I needed and wanted to build on the product side. And that was beneficial in the early days. Eventually that became a big bottleneck for the business, obviously. And it was growing, and suddenly we've got thousands of people using the service. And as soon as I flipped on revenue, I did hire an engineer to help me out.
Mm-hmm.
But we stayed pretty small for a while. I had an engineer, customer support rep, and did that for a while. And we had to, I think we had, a couple engineers after that. And then, but again, I wasn't the right guy to take that step on my own out into growing into a bigger business and eventually raising money. So I ended up bringing on a co-founder after like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years of the business, which is somewhat unusual, but I really needed the help, and I needed somebody who knew what the next stage of that business looked like. And so I brought on my co-founder, Adrian Lopez, amazing person. The first startup that I ever worked at out of university, he was there. We worked closely together, became really tight friends. And then I left LA, too big of a place for me. And, but he stayed there, went to startup after startup. And then he became part of the founding team at a company called Flipagram. And they became the fastest growing app in the App Store ever, at least at that point, up to that point. And then they got bought by ByteDance and then rolled up into what became TikTok. And so he went to Beijing and saw, how ByteDance does their thing. And so he just he had already played that game of the next stage of the business that we were just getting into. And he's also really good at hiring and managing and finding great people and retaining them. And so it just made a ton of sense to join forces and scale it up, because the company was growing whether I liked it or not. It just kept getting bigger. And the question was, are we going to strangle this thing, or are we going to let it thrive? And growing the team, bringing on someone that could help with that side was really a big piece in helping let it thrive.
Now, kind of going back right before you took money and raising capital. Obviously, we talked about the timing and having the technology and the tools available at that time, which weren't available, even a couple of years before that. What would you guys, doing in terms of acquiring customers? Because you did say, podcasting is a social, was kind of viral. What things did you guys have to spend money on, but you guys had to watch your dollars so it didn't kind of get out of control?
Yeah. This is something we're still, I think, trying different things at. Like there's never been like a silver bullet that just has, popped out at us. We do, for the longest time, we was all word of mouth and what we call the guest to host conversion, which is you bring someone onto the show, they see how easy it is to record, they've got an idea for a podcast, they join up as a host and start inviting other people as well. And something like 3 to 5% of the guests will decide to switch over to being a host. And that was just a good organic growth loop for us. I wouldn't call it like viral, but it was just good, steady, constant growth. And then, we've tried all kinds of things on the paid acquisition side, Google ads. It was hard to find the keywords gotten expensive. And oftentimes you find yourself spending just to protect your own domain and not even get out to new customers. And that just never felt like, we needed way more cash than we had to really play that game effectively against the other players. And so we have an affiliate program. We actually started using our own creators to help us outside of just bringing on guests. Hey, go ahead and run an ad on your show for Zencastr, and we'll have an affiliate program where you get kickbacks when people sign up and things like that. And that's been, that one's sort of guaranteed ROI positive because we're not paying up front. It comes after that we already get the money. And so that's been a good avenue. And as well as, we're actually trying to do Twitter ads right now because apparently they're really underpriced, but we can't get our ads approved. It takes forever. Like, I don't know what's going on over there. But yeah, we've been waiting like 2 weeks just to get our first ad approved. So I can't say we're still learning on that side, I would say.
Okay. So it sounds like, a lot of the best bets, at least for you, has been kind of the organic affiliate, tap into your existing existing users rather than paid ads.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll to add some more detail. Like we're doing things like testing out with LinkedIn, as
Mm-hmm.
well as Facebook has always been
Mm-hmm.
one of our big. I think Facebook has been our top referrer for a long
Mm-hmm.
time, and I think that's from like
Mm-hmm.
Facebook groups. But I think it's also like maybe people sending the link to people through Facebook chat. It's a little bit hard to tell,
Mm-hmm.
but that's always been a prime target for us, and we've done some. We're running paid ads there right now. What we've found is that we're getting a lot more response from mobile users than from people on desktop,
Mm-hmm.
which is great, except for we just launched our first mobile app,
Mm-hmm.
this earlier this year. And so it's a lot less featureful, if that's a
Mm-hmm.
word, than the desktop side. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we're finding is we're attracting users or attracting clicks at a good price, but we need to beef up the product on the mobile side in order to really get those conversions cranking. I think it may still be profitable at this moment, but
Mm-hmm.
it can be a lot better once we launch a few new key products into the mobile app itself, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to being on desktop. So, which has been another big transition. It was always been a desktop mobile or desktop um, browser app, but
Mm-hmm.
now everybody's going to and this is not just
Yeah.
now. I mean, this is a trend that's been
Yeah.
happening for a long time, but the majority of people are now on mobile, and a lot of people don't even
Mm-hmm.
have a desktop computer anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've had to kind of follow that trend as well, and make sure that we've got a good mobile offering.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, when you decided what was the point where you decided, hey, we need to raise money because we can't kind of keep this particular, we can't keep bootstrapping, right? We're facing pressures, external pressures from the marketplace. We need to raise money. Can you talk about a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was like any one thing that happened. I mean, you know, for instance, Spotify purchasing Anchor was one of
Mm-hmm.
those points where it's like, oh wow, like Anchor is uh they always took a bit of a different approach than us. They were always more on the distribution side
Mm-hmm.
and kind of lighter on the creator tools, and they did mobile first actually, which was in a lot of ways a smart move, but they didn't have it's you kind of have to have both. Like the guests love to come on mobile and use that, but the hosts a lot of times they want to be on their computer. They've got their whole setup. They've spent a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of money on. They're not that
Yeah.
interested in just running it all through a mobile device. And so
Mm-hmm.
anyway, bit of a tangent there, but the Anchor and Spotify thing was a point where we're like, okay, we could easily get pushed out of, way out into the margins here if we're not able to speed up our own development and get
Mm-hmm.
the product development more quickly. But also, I think just internally, without the exterior stuff going on, it was very easy to see from the beginning what the master plan could look like of, not just a recording piece, but like hosting, editing, um, audience growth, monetization, all in one place. Because we did surveys, and some of these podcasters were using up to like 12 different services for different things. If they were doing transcriptions and video
Mm-hmm.
editing and recording here, and using Headliner to make, they were using all, like they're jumping between a bunch of different tools and services, spending hundreds of dollars a month oftentimes on these things, and wasting a lot of time just like downloading and uploading to the different
Mm-hmm.
things. And so it was really easy to see that, hey, it would be better if this was all consolidated into one place, make it
Mm-hmm.
really easy for podcasters to create. But that was just a huge amount of work, and we
Yeah.
didn't have enough team members to do it. And we're like,
Mm.
let's, we don't want to see someone else build the vision while that we see. Let's make sure we're able to build it ourselves.
Yeah. How do you balance, you talk about all these other features now that you guys added because you saw that was kind of what the marketplace was asking for. So like, let me kind of give an analogy. So I got this microwave that's an air fryer. I think it bakes too, right? But it doesn't do like anything particularly good. Probably microwaving is like, but microwave is microwave. I don't know, it's either too strong or not strong enough. But it does air fryer. But we found out it is it's not a particularly good air fryer. So obviously we have a second one. So did you kind of ever come across where this is like, hey, we just don't want to make a hodgepodge of mediocre tools, right? And if they're coming to us an all in one, you know, we want to make sure that all the tools are good. Did you guys ever have that conversation? And if you guys did, how did the process goes to make sure that the not just the features but the quality of features was up to your par?
Yeah, I mean that's always a bit of a tug of war,
Huh.
is figuring out like what is the true MVP
Mm-hmm.
of the next part of the product that we're going to be launching, and does it just add when we're launching this, does it just add something to the pricing and features page that's going to help
Yeah.
sell it, or is it actually something that's going to be truly useful in the use of it? Because those are
Mm-hmm.
two different things. It's easy to throw up a bunch of bullet points. We've got this, we've got that, we've got that. But if they don't work together in a way that actually creates a usable workflow to accomplish the goal, then it really doesn't matter in the end. It might help you
Mm-hmm.
in your top of the funnel and conversion side, but your churn is going to be higher because it doesn't actually deliver on what the imagined value is going to be by the user. And so that's a lot. We think a lot about that. Like, how do we create a really usable workflow? And to be honest, like, it's not the best at any one thing in a lot of cases. I would say maybe the remote recording side,
Mm-hmm.
it is, but like there's other tools for like editing your podcast that are going to be way more powerful if you're an audio engineer and you want to really dig deep and really craft the tones and everything of the sound. But what we found is that like 95+% of podcasters are not audio engineers. They're not actually using those tools to their full extent. They
Mm-hmm.
just want to put an intro and an outro, maybe run dynamic range compression or something to help it fatten up the sound a bit, make your voice sound better. And then they want to be able to delete like parts where somebody said like a bad joke or whatever it may be,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like that's it. And so
Mm-hmm.
we realized, hey, we don't have to have the best editing piece out there. We just have to be able to cover that 90, what the use case is for that 95% of people, and make it really easy. I found that there's a lot of people that I was surprised to find that there was a lot of people using Zencastr just for solo recordings,
Mm-hmm.
which you can download Audacity, a free tool, or there's like all manner of like recording tools you could use, even QuickTime, to just that it's already on your computer to do those things. But what we found, and when talking to those people, they said, well, those like Audacity, it has a bunch of stuff I don't understand. It's got all these dials and knobs and settings, and it's intimidating. They're like, Zencastr just has a record button. I like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so it's so much more, at least for most of the people that we're dealing with, about making something really simple and easy that gets still outputs a high quality product than having all the bells and whistles and being the most powerful thing.
Yeah, and I can attest to this because there's for those who've not using Zencastr, there's a produce button, which after there's a recording, my team hits the produce button. I actually don't even know like what exactly that does, and I don't usually listen to myself after because I'm kind of I don't like listening to myself speak. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have kind of same thing, but all I know is the produce button's supposed to make me sound better and the other person sound better. So we just hit the button and then just let it rip. And so that's what we like about it, right? Exactly. You know, I, I don't obviously we're kind of more on the smaller end. We don't have a team of producers and mixing boards and all that. We're just two guys and a mic, and the simplicity of just hitting the produce button to get it as essentially as an MVP type, output is good enough. So that's why we appreciate it.
Well, that's great. That's our goal. Like
Yeah.
all that other stuff should be advanced mode, and you should just be able
Mhm.
to hit record, hit produce, hit publish, and like get back to your day.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, we're here with Josh Nielsen with Zencastr. Do you have any parting thoughts before we get into the rapid fire question section to young entrepreneurs or even old, but maybe getting into their bootstrap company and they're really just trying to set themselves apart in the competitive industry?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I think starting off bootstrapped is the way to go, unless you've already got a track record and like you've got traction and can go out and raise money. Like trying to think of raising money as the starting point is probably not the right idea. Like bootstrap it, figure that out. It'll force you to do a lot of things efficiently. That's going to be good for even a large business later on. And then also realize that where you start is not where you're going to end up. I went in the completely wrong direction for a while, and then you just got to be curious, pay attention to the signals that you're getting back from customers and people you're sharing with, and go from there.
All right. Thank you again, Josh, for hanging out with us. We are at the rapid fire question and answer session. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So who do you look up to?
Oh, more broadly or in business or?
Yeah, in business.
Man, I'm trying to give something that's not like a pat answer, like Steve Jobs or something. Strangely enough, I mentioned that this is not, we ended up not where I was expecting, but I always really liked the idea of like the start small, stay small company. Even though that didn't end up being the right choice for us in the end. But Rob Walling and that there's a whole community and even a conference built up around that I thought was pretty interesting and probably is the best option for most entrepreneurs, is trying to figure out how to carve out a small niche and something that you don't have to go head to head with huge, big competitors. And that's a lot more feasible of a path. My goal with the business, I'm going to add another one here, was I heard a podcast episode by someone named Amy Hoy. She's got a program called 30 by 500. And the idea was have really like feasible, achievable goals for your business. Like don't go out there trying to dominate the market and change the world. And it was just the 30 by 500 was you just need to get 500 people to pay you $30 a month. Then you've got a 15 grand a month revenue. And if you're a solopreneur, that's enough to kind of elevate you above the rat race typically. And like supposing you love what you're doing and get you to where like you can start having economic freedom. Most people, if you manage your money properly at that level, can, live a life where you're not worried about money all the time, basically. And I found that pretty inspiring. And so that was my initial goal, is I want to get to the 15K in MRR as a solopreneur and go from there.
What's your most favorite business book?
Man, I have a whole shelf of half-read business books over here. Let me look. I'm leaving the mic here, but let me look and see what I've been reading that's been interesting. I got one. There's a book called Traction that's pretty popular.
Yep. That's half read by me too.
Right. I can't really sit down and just read them all the way through. They're a little bit dry, but I love to reference them. So I like the ones that are written in a way that you can reference them. Yeah. This is a business book for me, but maybe not for everybody. It's Understanding Media. Marshall McLuhan talks a lot about kind of the philosophy of media and how it interfaces with our culture. And that one's been interesting. I read again, this is, a lot of people might say this, but I really got a lot of inspiration from the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson, I think is his name. It's not like a tactical business book, but it takes you through just the biography and the steps that Steve Jobs and Apple went through. And there's a lot to be learned just from seeing those stories. And I think it helped to have it couched in a narrative rather than just tactically. Another book that I think it's an ebook or a course that I read early on. There was one called Marketing for Developers. And as an engineer who wasn't really good at marketing or didn't really have any experience on the marketing side, it was that one is just tactical, good crash course in like, hey, engineer who probably doesn't know anything about marketing, here's like how you set up, your analytics so you can start having information. And here's how you start like getting, growing your funnel, building your funnel out and growing leads and that sort of thing. I found that one pretty helpful as well.
What is the best business advice you've ever received?
That I've received. I think, one that I think is rung more true over time, which is the Techstars motto, which is do more faster. And that is more kind of aimed at the startup space. But I think there's a lot of truth to that. Like, it's so easy, especially if you're a small team, to get really bogged down at a certain point where you're just not making any progress on, because you're like, for me, I got so like, I'd get so stuck in customer support. We had too many users for the team that we had. And I was spending most of my time on customer support, and I was the primary engineer, even though I had some help at that point. And it just felt like we were getting nowhere fast. And that's when it definitely opened up for other competitors to come in and to look at us and say like, oh, well, I think we can build that now. Because as we built it and launched it, a lot of the product became commoditized or easier to build because the browsers, APIs, and things and like open source libraries popped up where it's like something that took me 6 months to build. Now you can just like install it and it's there.
Yeah.
And so that was, actually I lost, where was I going? I got on a rant there. It'll come back to me. Oh, just the things were getting commoditized. And so we had to figure out, well, how do we still stay moving fast and relevant in the face of like what we've done in the past being easier to do now, other people coming into the space and like giving them room to kind of come in and see like, hey, we could build that and we could market it better. And like, let's go in and kind of eat these guys lunch. So I think speed and figuring out how to like stay on the tip of the wave and accelerate is really important, at least in a business like ours. And so, yeah, and for us, the solution ended up being we had to grow the team and we need money.
If you could do one thing over again, what would it be?
Like do it differently?
Do it differently or not do it at all?
I think it ties into what I kind of was just talking about is it took me a while to decide to give up on the dream of having like a solopreneur experience or like the start small, stay small thing. And I waited, I think, too long to the point where it was really stressful for me because I was trying to do too many things. It was hurting our users because they weren't getting the best service and the best products because we were so hamstrung on the personnel side. So doing that, making that jump a lot sooner in the company would have been a big one. And I think getting more, we were spoiled for such a long time because we didn't have, we were the first mover in the space for this kind of an app. And so we didn't have to be really good at marketing. Now it's gotten more competitive when we've had to figure out really how to get better at marketing. And so just doing that sooner as well, getting our marketing chops under us.
Talking about first movers, have you heard the term pioneers get arrows in their backs?
Yes, I have. And it's true.
Okay. So how do you, with kind of all that you know right now, how do you know if you're a pioneer and, kind of sit out and because you don't want arrows in your backs, or how do you know when to get into a particular market or industry? Because whether there's, maybe there's competitors, maybe there's not, but it's ripe for disruption.
As I mentioned, we got into it, but through like a technical barrier that got lowered. And so it wasn't so much looking at the landscape of like, where can we disrupt here? It didn't really even exist at the time, what we were doing and as such. And so that was a bit of a different one, but I can tell you from other competitors that have come into the space after us, what I think they've seen is like, hey, these guys have proved there's a market and a big business here. We're way better at maybe marketing or maybe some could be like, machine, the AI side or something, whatever they think
Mm-hmm.
is going to be their advantage. We can come in, quickly copy what's already been proven by these other companies, bring in our special, ingredients that's going to be that where we think we can, beat these other guys, and then
Mm-hmm.
come in that way. And especially since, well, another thing that we saw was, if when we came into the market, podcasting, as I mentioned, wasn't really hot. Then it got really hot, and then other companies could come in, and because they had started from zero but could grow really fast, they could then come in and raise. They could have their growth curve looked really good because they
Mm-hmm.
came into the market after it was already piping hot, and then they could come in and they could raise a lot of money based off of like a growth curve where we may have been absolute value higher than them. Our trend line was over several years as opposed to somebody coming in fresh. And so there was, definitely a few different companies that we saw come in late to the game, get in, do some good marketing, get a good growth curve, and then they were able to raise a bunch of money off of that, to sustain them. And that's an interesting strategy. If I was
Mm-hmm.
if I was trying to get into like a pre-existing market, like I'd be looking for something like that. Somebody else has already proven it, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
they are not that great on the marketing or the growth, or maybe their technology, like people are only using them because they're the only option, and but their tech kind of sucks. If you can come in and make a way better usable product, or marketed better or something like that, then that's an opportunity to come in and sweep in and be disruptive.
What's the biggest challenge in your business today?
Um, Man, there's lots of them. I think, figuring out how to be way better at marketing. We're doing a lot better than we have, but still a
Mm-hmm.
lot of room to grow there. Um, Still just like, there's still so much left to build. Figuring
Mm-hmm.
out how to prioritize the right things. What the grand plan, I think, is the master plan, I think, is easy to see, but knowing which pieces you should focus on next is a little bit harder to see. We did make a misstep, I would say, to give a concrete example, where we talked to podcasters and like, well, like we realized they don't care about high quality recordings in and of itself. They want to find their audience, grow their audience, and they want to make money typically, whether it's monetize their audience or driving leads to like a product or a service. And so we said, okay, let's figure out we've already got recording, we've already got distribution. Let's figure out how to get a monetization strategy built in here to help these guys make money. Well, we now have built all these monetization tools, and some users are using them to great effect. But what we found is so many users, podcast creators, don't have a big enough audience for that to even be relevant yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like half of all podcasters are below 500 monthly downloads or something like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's just not enough to work with to really accomplish the goal, most of the people's goals in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had to say, okay, we got the monetization stuff. It's working really well for the larger creators, but most of our creators are stuck behind this barrier of not finding their audience. And we really maybe would have been better off to start off with audience growth rather than trying to go down the monetization route. And now we've realized that, and now we're really focused on audience growth piece, on the audience growth side of things. We're getting into clipping, social distribution, helping people take their podcasts multi-platform, the right format for the right platform, find your audience where they're at, draw them back into the podcast. And that seems to be a really effective way to grow your audience from like zero to wherever you're going to go. And then we can layer in the monetization side.
Yeah. Have you heard the term 3 feet from gold?
No, tell me about this.
Okay. So it's kind of a metaphor. So the story goes, the prospector buys land because he hears there's gold in our hills, and buys the equipment and digs, doesn't hit any gold. He sells it to the next guy who just digs 3 feet and hits a large vein of gold. So as a serial startup guy, how do you know when you might just be 3 feet from gold or when to pivot?
Ooh, when to pivot. That's a good one. As I'm, we have done, I don't know if we've ever done a proper pivot because it's always been sort of all in service of like the broader goal that of helping podcasters. But, you know, I don't know if I have a good answer for that. What I can say is the first company I tried to start, I think we had maybe no more than 30 registered users after like several months of trying. And I think that's when you say, hey, maybe we need to reevaluate. Like, when it's work. It's it's a lot easier to know when it's working than to know when it's not.
Mhm.
Because like you said, you always feel like, oh, it could just be the next thing that gets us there. But I think if you're really truly intellectually honest with yourself, and if you've heard enough stories about other people who have gotten product market fit and what that looks like, pattern match against that. Because
Mhm.
when it's if you're just not growing at all, it's chances and people are not excited about what you're doing, your next feature is not going to change that. Or probably won't. And we were lucky enough with Zencastr that when we launched that first, it was such a big pain point. I think it's so much about the research you do. You got to
Mhm.
make sure you're really providing something valuable. When I was building the music thing, it was like, oh, this is fun. I like the idea, but I don't need it. It's not something I would pull
Yeah.
out my pocketbook for.
Yeah.
Whereas when I started talking about the podcasting thing, like, hey, if I could solve this double-ended problem, what's that worth? And someone said $20 a month, I'd pay. I was like, okay, that's the first time somebody told me they'd pay money.
Yeah.
Actually, let's go build it out. And when we launched it, there were, hundreds of people who started using it, then thousands. And so I think if maybe a good way to look at it is if you're seeing, I'm just riffing here, but if you're seeing word of mouth growth for your app, then you're probably onto something. If
Mhm.
it's valuable enough that people are talking to other people about it, then you've probably tapped into something good, even if maybe they're not paying you yet or converting it properly. But like I said, we ran it for almost 2 years for free. But by the time I turned on paid plans, we had, thousands of people using it recording. And
Mhm.
I was pretty confident it was providing something of value that we could charge for at that point.
Yeah. What's the best thing you spent $100 or less on that has greatly improved your personal life or your business life?
Um, Sorry, I'm going to go back. There's one other thing I want to say
Uh,
about the last one, which is
uh,
we got our first 100 users by going onto Twitter and
hmm.
searching for people that were complaining about the problem that we had, and specifically the guests complaining again to the hosts, saying, hey, I can't listen to this, your audio quality is terrible.
Mhm.
So looking at Twitter, people love to complain on Twitter. If you can find people complaining on, or if you can't find people on Twitter complaining about what you're building or the problem you're solving, then I would think twice about it. But if you
Mm.
can, then you can quantify the problem. And so that's a good way, I think, to kind of come at that problem. But to
Yeah.
the next question. Oh, go
I
ahead.
mean, just really quick, I think that's the golden nugget. I don't know if the people listen to this doesn't get anything else out of this, you know, interview. I think that's a really big golden nugget right there. To find a market because people complaining about it. There may be a solution obviously hasn't been solved by the marketplace, and there's an opportunity. So the next question, to repeat it, is what's the best thing you've spent $100 or less on that has greatly improved your personal life or your business life?
Well, you know what? I think these may be a little bit over that, like maybe 150. But these headphones, they're Sennheiser headphones. I've been wearing like I'm a brand loyalist now for these headphones because um they have like these velour padded ear
Velour.
things and they fit totally over
Uh,
your ear. And
uh,
if you're trying to code for like 12 hours a day or sit at your computer a long time and use them, they don't have like the ear pain you get from the other ones. They sound
mhm.
great, and they make you look cool too.
Yeah. Make you look like you know what you're doing too, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hey,
And these are the HD for people that I'm sure it'll all come
yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Where is it? The HD 598 is what these are. But yeah.
All right. We'll put up that Amazon affiliate link up here in the show notes. I'm just kidding. Thanks again, Josh. I think this was a awesome interview, lots of golden nuggets. And thank you again for hanging out with us and sharing your story about Zencastr. We love Zencastr. Use it for quite a while here. So looks like you might have the time to go. So thanks again for hanging out with us.
Awesome. Thanks for the opportunity, Dan. Chat soon.
Yeah. All right.